I do understand that. But why were the number of calls down? Is it because we have a lack of people going out recreating? I doubt that highly. I think it's because we had a search and rescue program that was highly effective, being well trained, and we were training people that were out there how to safer recreate. And if they're out there doing that, hence they're paying attention, they're carrying GPSs, they're carrying water, they're carrying various life-saving tools with them, blankets, shelter, things like this. They're notifying people where they're going. Where they weren't doing that before because they weren't told what to do. And unfortunately, as we all know, sometimes you have to tell people what to do to better their own lives. So I think getting rid of the position was not the right decision. I think it was showing the public that it was working extremely well. And we should continue on with that. Obviously, when we have no search and rescue incidents whatsoever, then we have a perfect program. There are obviously other programs. I remember working with CASA when I was in detectives just a little bit. As far as the other things that go with that specifically, I'm not familiar with it to know where the ins and outs are at right now. So, as far as cutting things, I don't know that we necessarily need to cut any programs. We need to look at reinstating existing programs that we once had.
Anyone else?
Because I deal with grants and work with grants, grants are cut every year. The paperwork involved with grants is excessive. I can vouch for the 2 people in our department that work on grants. It causes an increase in paperwork, extra hours. We don't get the added staff. I don't think we get as much credit. Listening to the debate tonight, a lot of the focus and concern is on everyone else being overworked. But you're talking about getting more grants. I'm wondering, if you get more grants and the grants go away as they always have been and are getting cut year after year, what happens to those employees you hired later on down the road? Do they just go away? Are you going to cut your operating budget to save those positions? Because it's great and dandy to create positions, but if you can't retain them over a long period of time, what good does that do?
You know what? You hit on a topic that obviously, if I remember right, the original search and rescue or SRO program was originally funded by government, and then it was supposed to be, you're supposed to slowly budget that position into your office. That's something that you have to do because, again, just like that, with the grants that are slowly going away, with these lean times, it's going to get leaner, folks, a lot leaner. And we need to become more efficient with what we have. We need to realize that we're going to have to become a more efficient machine, and manpower is something that we need not to cut. We don't need to be putting more people in the unemployment line. There's other things that we can do. We can be driving cars well past 100,000 miles if that's what it takes. We can be doing things to increase the mileage of those cars. We can be doing things, better training to reduce liability, to reduce insurance claims. Yeah, there's so many things that I think that we can do to increase a little bit of money so that we can start budgeting in what we currently have. And if we can't ask for more from the county commissioners because the money is not out there, and we have to obviously prepare for the event that maybe they're going to ask for a budgetary cut, we need to start looking at, when we're using pens and pencils and we're throwing it away when it's only 50% used, that's obviously inefficiency. I remember when this topic came up before, and Jim DuPont came downstairs, he had all hands meeting, and he said there was supposed to be, and Chuck, you can probably correct me, it was $200 and some odd thousand going to be cut out of the sheriff's office budget. And I'm sure Chuck remembers this one. I was one of the deputies that stood forward and said, if this is what's going to happen, let me know. I got a mouth to feed and I got a job waiting for me in Washington. If that's the case, I'm out of here. There's other deputies that need to work too. Okay, I'm not trying to pat myself, but what I'm getting at is they were honest and up front, and the first thing out of their mouth is no, we are not cutting personnel. We have other measures and ways we can do it. They called an all-hands meeting. We went downstairs, and Jim said, in fact, one of the things was the pencils. We used to have pencils around the office that got thrown away when they were half used. One of the other things is the logs that were printed out. That was now scratch paper instead of being thrown away every single day. There's so many things that we need to revert back to become more efficient and save money. And that's how, when you start cutting money out of your budget through loss of grants or lack of grants or grants being reduced, or the county commissioners coming in and saying you have to cut X number of dollars out of your budget, we don't have to go into a panic mode. We don't have to lay people off. That is the last thing that you ever want to do.
Well, I certainly agree with that. Since I took over, I'm on my third budget. I haven't cut it yet, and I've told the commissioners, all three of them, and the prior two, that I'm not going to cut it. You know, when it comes to public safety, if I have to compromise, I'm going to go to the public with it. And I've ruffled a few feathers with that, but I have not laid off anybody yet, and I have no intentions on it. There has been some grants that I've looked into, in fact, dozens of grants, especially the COPS grants that are really popular now. A lot of those are sustainable after the first year, the second year, the third year. And most of the time, you can't hire somebody and think, well, I've got a retirement coming up in a year or so, and when the grant funding runs out, I will just put that person in this retirement spot. They're not like that anymore. They used to be, and some of them, very few of them still are. But I'm not going to hire somebody that I know I can't fund, because you could end up laying somebody off or cutting an area where you really don't want to cut. So a lot of that grant funded stuff, I look at it very, very carefully. I'm getting tired too. Go ahead.
No, we're all getting rummy. I'll be brief, guys, because I know everybody wants to get out of here, and I see I started the group. But Liz, once again, great question. And I'd like to say I was a grant guy for 15 years, but like Karen was the grant person. She just had me sign stuff and told me what to write a lot. So the reality is it was always a team effort. But I think that it's important to closely evaluate the grants to see what even some of the requirements, reporting requirements are pretty extreme. And you have to look at what the long-term effects are. To be honest, we've all sucked at that. And I'm here to tell you that I kind of sucked at it when I was there, and I know Mike sucks at it now. And if you elect Lance, he'll suck at it too. We're really bad at that, I think, as a bunch of law enforcement administrators, as, oh, money, great, and then, well, the money's gone 3 years later, and it's like, oh shit, we forgot about that. You know, and that can happen. So I think it's important that we put a little more effort into that. I'm all in favor of grants, and you know what? If I got to hire somebody and train them and it goes away, I'd rather have had that person for a few years than not at all. I think that grant funding is an important tool right now in a mill levy limited department. Our funding is pretty limited, and about the only way we can get more money in is to try and suck some out of the general fund, which is pretty tough, or it's to get money from grants. So I feel pretty strongly about that.
Yeah, you know, part of that I agree with you, Chuck. You know, I certainly, a large portion of my budget right now is grant money, and I agree with grant money. Unfortunately, if I hire somebody now with grant money and 2 years down the road the grant funding goes away, it's not that person that goes away, because in the contract it's the last person hired. So I think that's something to consider too. And Megan, I hope you don't mind this, but I'm going to use you for an example. When we hired you on a grant the first year, and then the second year, we were able to sustain that simply because of us charging for the forensic interviews, and we worked you right into the system. And it's thinking like that when it comes to these grants is the way to go, because you can you don't have to worry about having to lay somebody off or make some drastic cuts because the funding run out.
Anybody else?
I got one quick one. Just the thoughts on sworn deputies' involvement in volunteer, i.e. the dive team, mountain rescue, search and rescue. if that should